Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Schiller from Engine, and you have joined the BTV series, The Media World Accelerated: What Next? And who better to join me today than someone whose LinkedIn says he leads the future with learnings from the past. And you know he's experienced because he worked at ad agencies that no longer exist, like Ted Bates. This, of course, is Carl Fremont, who is one of the best known, well-respected and well-liked industry figures. Carl, welcome to our series.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Glad to be here.
So, we're talking a lot about the future. And of course, I joke, but the past is often prologue to the future. And today we're going to focus on media silos and what benefits they've brought and why breaking them down is important for the future as the world evolves. So, Carl, talk to us a little bit about how you've seen the world from media planner, direct marketer, now agency CEO, how you see the world and how you think about silos today.
Great question. And as you said, I think about the future from lessons from the past. I'm going to be this year, actually next month will be my 40th year in this industry. So I know you're saying, I can't believe it, you don't look it, but it is 40 years. So learned a lot along the way. And one of the things that we still have are silos. It's hard to believe that after 40 years, we're still working in a world of silos. So let me unpack that. What do we mean by silos? And they're all around. And what does it mean when you're in different silos? So first, let's talk about marketing and the marketing silos that exist. As we know, brands today are built on building their image, building their association with the brand, and that drives demand. That drives you wanting to acquire the brand and then invest and spend more with the brand and buy it more. Those three silos, those three areas of marketing today, from building the brand to acquiring a customer and driving revenue to after you are acquired and CRM, are all siloed today in marketing. And so there's a separate team, and that's both on the brand side, the marketing side, as well as on the agency side, which we'll also talk about what impact that has on media and for companies like your own Engine when you're siloed that way. So there are separate teams that focus on brand. There are certain teams that focus just on acquisition, and there are teams that focus on CRM, building that relationship with that customer over time. That needs to be all united. And today they're very siloed. From an investment side and from a consumer experience side, those three things are very siloed. So
when you say silo, you mean even though they're all part of the purchase funnel from brand to conversion, you mean they operate against their own objectives and they don't often think about the bigger objective?
Absolutely. And they're siloed. So you said it well, Scott, but also they're separate teams that don't necessarily share, as you said, the same objective, and they work independently. So what does that mean then? From a business side, you're not developing a single consumer experience, and it could impact each of the KPIs, each of the metrics at each stage of that purchase journey, if it's not all well in sync and connected with a single consumer experience. What that means from the media side for companies like your own Engine is that you're dealing with different objectives for the same brand. And it's hard for media companies like your own to bring it all together if everything's in a silo. So that is a big impact that I still see today as we had 40 years ago.
Carl, as the CEO of Quigley Simpson, a well-regarded, well-known agency known as much for creative as direct response work historically, you're seeking to broaden the remit for the organization. How do you think about the silos that exist and best take advantage of the experts within each silo and have them work across so that you can have a bigger, more compound effect on results for a client?
A great question, and I love the way you positioned it all, Scott. So thank you.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
I can see, and I love your background. But as you and I have discussed before, looking at it from the entire consumer journey experience, and one of the benefits that we have at Quigley is that we do everything from strategy to brand creative to driving acquisition and demand to the analytics to long-term customer value creation through CRM. So by looking at the entire consumer journey and experience, we can connect it all. And that's what I was just talking about. When you have companies that are siloed, agencies that are siloed in specialty areas, or you have the marketer siloed in different areas of responsibility, the consumer experience isn't all being brought together, but also from a business outcome perspective, it isn't all brought together. So what do I quickly mean by that? I mean, when it's most important that we look at the value of a customer over time, its lifetime value. If you're only looking at it from the front end in terms of the initial acquisition and the initial revenue opportunity, you're not looking at what's the potential of that customer over time. And that's where we need to bring everything together. And, for you, Scott, and, working at a media agency, it's important for you to be able to help brands and agencies across the entire consumer journey because you have those opportunities. So how do you think about it in those terms as well? And what would make it best for you at Engine to have that end-to-end, help brands from an end-to-end perspective?
I think that's the challenge for anyone who's in the revenue business. Now, Engine is a digital media company with expertise in technology. We have the EMX Exchange. We also have our Insights Group, which is a primary research, well-known, well-regarded research company. And what we do is we marry our programmatic media, our SSP, one of the top 5 SSPs in the CTV space, and we marry that with audiences or unique research opportunities, whether it's extended reach or measurements of audiences. And so I like to think about the challenge of a marketer more holistically. The biggest mistake that companies in the ad tech world make is that they think of themselves as the only solution. And I remind people constantly that our business is called ad tech because we live in the ecosystem of advertising. It isn't tech, but it's ad tech. And so what's important is your perspective and bringing a larger perspective to the discussion while addressing the tactical needs of a client. And so that's how we think about it. And I think that the people that are able to connect with the right conversations and the right brands for their businesses can drive effect. So that's how I think about it. But I want to ask you, is communications planning a separate discipline at your organization? Because that's another way that people bring the silos together.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And being able to look holistically across that consumer journey, but also understanding consumer planning needs to be tied with analytics in order to be truly effective, in my belief, because you need to understand not only how to engage at every step of the journey, which is what communication planning will do, but what level of attention and investment should be given at each stage, given where the brand is in terms of the consumer perception and where they are in that purchase journey. So most effective is when you combine planning with analytics together.
So speaking of breaking down the silos, we just finished this summer the Olympics, and the Olympics and other big events are bellwethers for how consumers consume media, how media outlets display media. And we saw a number of factors contribute to the overall learning of our industry. We saw fractured audiences show the difficulty in using digital, linear, print, radio, sound, and bringing together messages, united messages across those platforms. You saw the pandemic, which exacerbated all these trends. And of course, there's the rise of streaming, which is disrupting both the revenue models, subscriptions, and advertising, as well as the way consumers consume media. What are your learnings from this period of time? What are your learnings, and what advice do you have for marketers who are trying to reach consumers in this very changing environment of such seismic shifts?
Yeah, we're all living through such a change. I mean, as you said, Scott, it's been accelerated because of COVID, because these changes were happening before. But we can learn from the past, as I always say. And I think there's one word to describe it, and that's flexibility. And we need to, as marketers, be flexible in terms of how we're engaging consumers, looking at it from cross-platform, looking at it from inventory sources, because nothing is exactly predictable the way we would like it to be. So we need to be flexible. We have to have contingency planning and be able to have that at the ready when we see shifts in the market, shifts in response, shifts in behavior. We need to have that contingency planning. And I believe that one big lesson learned in the past year and a half is flexibility. And just think about traditional retailers, how they had to become very flexible. They had to look at alternative ways of marketing versus just solely retail. It had to be giving people options and choices to pick up the merchandise outside the store, buy online, buy at retail at certain hours. So that flexibility and having contingency planning is essential today, not only from the marketing side, but from the media side as well, because we're in such a state of flux.
So as we look to wrap up today's series, I want to go talk a little bit about Carl the person. So talk to us about, who are your role models, and when you're hiring people today, what do you look for?
Great questions. I'll start with the latter, and then I'll go back to role models. So I believe one of the best assets that we can have in our teams across is curiosity and the insatiable quest for learning and for knowledge and for growing and not doing things in a routine. I love people who color outside the lines, who and reward people for thinking outside of the box and rewarding. So we need people who are not just going to do things rote. We all know the expression hands on keyboard. Well, what about hands off keyboard and having people think and having them create and invent? We need to get back to that era of invention and creation. And that is a balance of doing things efficiently through ad tech and ad tech platforms, but also to be creative and innovate. And so I look myself, the people who inspired me throughout my career were those people who created and invented and took risk and chances. And for me, one of the key role models was Lester Wunderman earlier in my career. I think he's was the grandfather of direct marketing. What we used to call direct marketing, now we call performance. And he always took everything from a simplistic consumer behavior approach. He looked at things and said, how are consumers reacting and behaving, and how do we create opportunities, marketing, products that match their behaviors and interests. And I think if there's anything we're learning from the past, it is about listening to consumers, understanding their behavior, and being flexible in terms of how we market to them.
And he didn't even have keyboards when he invented that. So speaking of that, Carl, thank you for taking the time to join us today on the Beat TV Engine series, The Media World Accelerated, What's Next. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Do it any day you ask.